Story 1. I've always been a laid-back guy, minding my own business, focused on college and my internship. I lived alone in a small apartment in an old building, the kind with narrow hallways and dim yellowish lighting that gave everything a weird old movie feel. My next-door neighbor always intrigued me, a thin old man with sparse hair and sunken eyes whom I rarely saw. I didn't know his name or what he did for a living. All I knew was that he hardly ever went out, almost always at night, and every week he would drag large garbage bags to the building's dumpster. Not the usual kitchen trash bags, but heavy black ones, as if they were filled with rubble. I never paid much attention, but there was something about him that unsettled me, a slow, calculated way of moving, like he was always measuring each step. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon. I came back from my internship and found a package at my door, labeled with my apartment number, but someone else's name. When I looked closer, I realized it belonged to my neighbor. The delivery guy must have made a mistake. Normally, I would have left it there and gone about my life, but that package made me curious. It was rectangular, large, and when I shook it, I heard a metallic rattle inside. Curiosity got the best of me. I opened it. What I found inside made my stomach knot. A bunch of wires, cables, and an old video recording device, the kind that used tapes. At the bottom of the box, there was an envelope filled with external hard drives, each labeled with a handwritten date. Some were recent. Others dated back long before I had moved in. My heart started pounding faster. This wasn't something a normal guy would have at home, let alone receive so frequently. I stood there, holding one of the hard drives in my hand, debating whether I should check it on my computer. My curiosity won. I plugged in one of the hard drives, and as soon as the files popped up on the screen, a chill ran down my spine. There were hundreds of videos, all organized by date and time. I picked one at random, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. The footage was grainy, black and white, like security camera footage. The angle was strange, pointing into a small, dark room. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then someone entered the frame, a man sitting in a chair, tied up, a rag stuffed into his mouth. My fingers froze on the mouse. The video kept playing, but I already knew I shouldn't be watching it. I shut everything down immediately, turned off my computer, and started sweating. What the hell had I just seen? And why was my neighbor keeping that? I felt sick, a horrible sensation of having touched something I shouldn't have. I decided I would return the package and pretend I had never opened it. But when I stood up, something made me stop. For the first time since I moved in, I noticed that his apartment door was slightly open. Just a tiny gap, but open. And there, in the darkness, was a faint glow. Not just any glow. Screens. Multiple screens. I blinked a few times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My body went cold when I realized what I was seeing. Monitors displaying multiple live images. One of them, right in the center, showed the inside of my room. I froze. I wanted to run, but my legs felt anchored to the floor. The monitor showed my bed, my desk, my jacket draped over the chair, things I had just seen minutes ago when I walked in. Time seemed to slow as I tried to process it. How did he have a camera in my room? Where was it? My eyes darted toward the gap in his door, trying to take in more details without being noticed. Besides the monitors, I saw cables scattered across the floor and a desk covered in notes. But it was something moving on the screen that made my breath hitch. In the corner of the monitor displaying my room, a small reflection glimmered. Tiny, almost imperceptible. It was a lens, and it was behind my wardrobe. I swallowed hard, slowly stepping back. I needed to get out of there. Run, call the police, anything. But then before I could take a step, his door creaked open just a little more, enough to reveal a pair of sunken eyes staring at me. Cold, expressionless eyes. My stomach churned as I realized he had been there the whole time, watching me as I looked inside. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth, slow and calculated. "See something interesting?" His voice was low, almost a whisper, and in that instant, I knew I was screwed. My first reaction was to step back, but I knew that if I showed fear, it could be worse. So I swallowed hard and forced a nervous chuckle. "No, just saw your door was open. There was a misdelivered package, that's all." My voice wavered, and I knew he noticed. He kept staring at me, motionless as if analyzing me. A heavy silence settled between us. Then, without breaking eye contact, he slowly pushed the door shut until it clicked into place. The sound echoed in the empty hallway. My heart was about to explode. I grabbed the box and rushed back to my apartment, locking the door and pressing my back against it, trying to breathe. My hands were shaking. He knew I had seen. I stood there for a while, unsure what to do. Should I call the police? But what if he got rid of the evidence first? I needed to act fast. I grabbed my phone and started dialing, but stopped halfway. A horrible realization hit me. I looked around my apartment. If he had cameras in my room, who's to say he didn't have them elsewhere? My living room, my bathroom. I felt exposed, violated. Every object in my home now seemed suspicious. Then, something even worse happened. My phone vibrated in my hand. A message. No name, no number. Just 2 words. "Don't do it." The air thickened. My fingers went numb as I stared at the message on the screen. How did he know? Was he listening to me? Watching me? My breath came short, and a wave of paranoia consumed me. I looked around, searching for anything out of place. My eyes landed on the bookshelf near the TV. One book was slightly out of place. I stepped closer, my stomach tightening. When I pulled it out, what I found behind it made my blood freeze. A small hidden camera with a faint red LED blinking. He had been watching me the whole time. My vision blurred for a second. I had to get out. Now. I grabbed my wallet, my keys, and left the apartment without looking back. In the hallway, everything felt darker, like the walls were closing in on me. I hurried to the stairs, but then I heard a sound that made my heart stop. A slow creak. His door was opening again. I didn't wait to see. I ran. I took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripping, a chill running down my spine. I reached the lobby and nearly crashed through the glass door as I pushed it open. The cold night air hit my face, but I didn't stop. I ran aimlessly, just trying to get away from that building. I only stopped when my legs ached and my head throbbed. Leaning against a pole, I tried to catch my breath. My body was still trembling. I needed a plan, needed help. I pulled out my phone, ready to call the police, but another notification popped up. A new number. This time the message was longer. If you tell anyone, I'll know. Go home. Now. My stomach twisted. He was watching me in real time, maybe even following me. I looked around, scanning faces, movements. Just a normal street, people coming and going, unaware of my terror. My mind was racing. I couldn't go back. I couldn't stay there. So, I did the only thing that made sense. I went straight to the nearest police station. I told them everything. They listened, but at first, they didn't seem to take me seriously. Only when I mentioned the videos of tied-up people did one officer pay closer attention. After checking the address, his expression changed. Are you sure it's apartment 304? I nodded, confused. He exchanged glances with his colleague before saying, because that apartment has been vacant for months. My body went cold. No, that can't be. I see that guy every day. My voice trembled. The officer sighed and pulled out an old report. My heart nearly stopped when I read it. The former tenant of 304 had been found dead in the apartment months before I moved in. A thin old man, with sparse hair and sunken eyes. His body had already begun decomposing when they discovered him. There were signs of forced entry, but nothing was ever proven. The case was never solved. My stomach turned. Then, who had I been seeing? Who had been living there all this time? And most importantly, who had been watching me? Story 2. It was supposed to be just a peaceful trip. Amanda and I had been together for 3 years, and we finally managed to take a weekend just for ourselves. We got in the car and drove to a rented cabin in the countryside, surrounded by a dense forest and empty roads. The drive was calm until halfway there we stopped at a gas station. Small, the kind that looks forgotten in time, with only one gas pump and a flickering sign. While Amanda went inside to buy snacks, I leaned against the car, staring into nothing. That's when I felt it. That gaze. At the other pump, a man stood. Tall, thin, with sparse facial hair and sunken eyes. He wasn't pumping gas. He was just there, motionless, staring at us. I tried to ignore it, but every time I looked back, he was still staring, not blinking. A chill ran down my spine. Amanda came back, throwing the bags into the seat. "Let's go," I muttered, getting into the car quickly. As soon as I started the engine and reversed, the man took a step forward, like he wanted to approach. I didn't wait. I sped up and got out of the gas station as quickly as I could, with the unsettling feeling that this trip was about to go terribly wrong. We drove in silence for a while. Amanda noticed I was tense and asked what had happened. I told her about the man at the gas station, about the way he was looking at us. She chuckled lightly, trying to calm me down. Maybe he was just a weird guy, but I knew it wasn't just that. My hands were sweaty on the wheel and the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. That's when I noticed something in the rearview mirror. Distant headlights, but constant. A vehicle was following us. I pretended not to see and kept driving, trying to ignore the shiver running down my neck. But the road was long, and that car wasn't overtaking us or slowing down. It just followed us. After about 15 minutes, I decided to test it. I took any exit, a smaller, even more deserted road. The car followed. Amanda finally noticed. "It's behind us." My throat went dry. A few more minutes passed, and then we were sure. The car, a rusty van, no plates, started to get closer. By now, my adrenaline was through the roof. I stepped on the gas. The van sped up with us. The road was dark, no streetlights, no sign of civilization. Just the two of us and that unknown vehicle getting closer. And then, out of nowhere, the van's headlights went out. My heart skipped a beat. The van vanished into the darkness behind us, like it had never been there. I kept my foot on the gas, feeling sweat trickle down my neck. Amanda grabbed my arm. Where did it go? I didn't know. The rearview mirror only reflected the dark, empty road, but the feeling of being followed didn't fade. I kept driving fast, trying to stay calm until something glittered ahead on the asphalt. Small shards, scattered like invisible traps. My reflex was to slam on the brakes, but it was too late. The car jolted, a sharp noise echoed from the body, and seconds later the steering wheel started pulling. Damn it. I pulled over to the shoulder. One of the tires had been shredded. Amanda covered her mouth with her hand. I got out of the car, my chest rising and falling rapidly. I grabbed the spare tire from the trunk, trying to stay focused, but my eyes couldn't stop scanning the darkness around us. The silence was suffocating. Amanda held the phone with the flashlight on, illuminating the empty road. "Do this quickly," she whispered. I crouched down to change the tire, my hands trembling, but then I heard it. Footsteps, coming from the woods beside the road, slow, dragging, as if someone wanted us to hear them. My blood ran cold. Amanda noticed too. "Is someone there?" Her voice trembled. The flashlight flickered when something moved in the dark. My body froze. Amanda's flashlight trembled in her hand, illuminating only the emptiness between the bushes. But I knew someone was there. I could feel it. The footsteps stopped, replaced by absolute silence. A silence that only happens when someone is waiting. A knot rose in my throat and I forced myself to keep changing the tire, even though my fingers were slipping with sweat. Amanda swallowed hard and whispered, "We need to get in the car now." But I already knew that any sudden movement could trigger whatever was watching us. Then the sound came again, this time from behind the car. A dry crack, like a twig breaking underfoot. Amanda turned the flashlight in that direction and let out a stifled scream. For a second, I saw it, a crouched silhouette near the trunk. But when the light hit, it moved too fast, disappearing into the darkness. My mind went into panic mode. There was more than one. I dropped everything and pulled Amanda into the car. I locked the doors and hit the ignition button. The engine roared and sputtered. I tried again. Nothing. My chest was rising and falling, and my vision blurred with sheer panic. Amanda stared at the windshield, her eyes wide. "Oh my God." Her voice was just a whisper. I turned to look, and that's when I saw it. The van, parked sideways on the road, its headlights off. My mind screamed at me to do something, but my body wouldn't obey. The van was there, still, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Amanda started hyperventilating next to me. "They're playing with us," she whispered, and I knew she was right. Whoever they were, they could have caught us earlier, but they were letting us feel the panic rise. A sick game. My hand shook as I tried to turn the key again. The engine sputtered, and this time it started. But then the van's headlights came on. The blinding beam illuminated our car like a stage. My heart nearly stopped when I saw shadows moving around the van. 3, 4? I couldn't tell, but they were coming. They weren't running, just walking slowly, as if they knew they had already won. Without thinking, I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The car jolted and shot down the road. The van didn't move. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw the shadows standing in the middle of the road, watching us as we disappeared into the darkness. They didn't try to follow us. They didn't need to. They knew we would never forget. Story 3. We just wanted some views, that was it. The challenge was blowing up on social media. Go into abandoned places, film at night, and post the reactions. The scarier, the more likes. Me, Bruno, and Leticia had already broken into an old school in a burned-down house last week, and we wanted to level up. That's when Bruno mentioned the factory, a huge place in the middle of nowhere that had closed a few years ago after a mysterious fire. They said gangs used it for meetings. That bad stuff went on there. But as far as we knew, it was just stories to scare curious people. So one Friday night, we grabbed our flashlights, cameras, and went there. The place was worse than I imagined. Rusty gates, peeling walls, and a strong, moldy smell in the air. We climbed over the fence and entered through what seemed to be the old cafeteria. The floor was covered in broken glass and overturned furniture. We filmed everything, commenting on the burn marks on the walls and making jokes about the situation. That's when Leticia found footprints in the dust on the floor. Recent ones. We exchanged looks. We weren't the only ones there. My mouth went dry. Bruno laughed, trying to mask the nervousness. Maybe some other group came here to film before us. But I knew it wasn't just that. The dust was thick, accumulated over years. If someone had passed through there recently, they could still be here. We tried to ignore it and kept filming, but the mood had already shifted. Every step echoed through the empty building, and the shadows from our flashlights seemed to move on their own. We followed a long hallway until we found a staircase leading to the second floor. The place looked like an abandoned office, old papers scattered, chairs tipped over. That's when we saw the door. It was a small room, different from the others. The peeling paint revealed wood underneath, and the doorknob seemed clean, like someone used it regularly. Leticia pointed the flashlight at the crack under the door. There was light inside. None of us moved. My heart was pounding in my chest. Bruno, always the bravest, raised the camera and recorded while I, trembling, carefully pushed the door open. It creaked. The smell hit me first. A mix of sweat, cigarette smoke, and something I didn't want to identify. And then we saw. The door slammed against the wall with force, and I swear for a second, no one appeared on the other side. Just the dark, empty hallway, as if the footsteps had been a collective delusion. But then, a figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, broad shoulders, dark clothes, and a hood covering part of his face. The weak light from the flashlight reflected something in his hand, a knife. Leticia let out a stifled sob. The man stood still, as if analyzing us, enjoying the fear on our faces. No one moved. I could hear my pulse thudding in my ears. Then he took a step inside. It was like a trigger. Bruno dropped the camera and grabbed my arm. Leticia bolted out through the other door across the room, and we followed. We ran down the hall without looking back, hearing the heavy thud of boots pounding the floor behind us. We leapt down the stairs, skipping steps. Bruno tripped and almost fell. We heard a muffled scream, Leticia. She had separated from us. Panic took over. "Lady," I yelled, but there was no way to know where she was. The factory felt like a maze, and the man was still coming. I wanted to go back, wanted to find Leticia, but every second we lost, there could be our last. Bruno yanked me hard by the arm. "We need to get out and call for help." I knew he was right. The air in the factory felt suffocating, and the echo of the man's footsteps was getting closer. We ran without thinking, crossing the destroyed cafeteria and jumping through the broken window we had entered. My chest burned from running, and my vision was blurry with desperation. As soon as we got to the street, I looked back, expecting to see Leticia running after us. But she didn't come. It was the worst moment of my life. Every fiber of my being screamed to go back, to search for her. But Bruno was already dialing the police, shouting the location. I stood still, staring into the factory's darkness. That's when I saw it, a shadow behind one of the broken windows. I couldn't see clearly, but something told me it was Leticia. Or at least, it had been her. The sirens began to echo down the road, and I felt a twinge of relief. But when I looked back at the window, the shadow was no longer there. Story 4. I've always been fascinated by stories about isolated communities, people who left everything behind to live away from society, following their own rules. As a journalist, I had investigated some strange cults, but nothing prepared me for what I found on that forum. The place was called Nova Terra, and its members talked about it as if it were paradise. But there was something strange, cryptically optimistic messages. Phrases like, "Here we find the truth. Once you come, you never want to leave. The world outside is rotten, but we have been reborn." I knew I needed to see this up close, so I pretended to be interested, exchanged messages with one of the members, and got an invitation. The trip was long, 3 hours of road, then another hour on a dirt trail with no cell phone signal. Slowly, the modern world disappeared. When I arrived, I was welcomed with warm smiles. People dressed in simple clothes with braided hair, looking too happy in a strange, artificial way. The leader, a man named Elias, hugged me as if he already knew me. "Welcome to your new home." My stomach churned. I hadn't even said I was staying yet. In the first few days, everything seemed normal, or at least normal within what I expected. The place was organized, almost idyllic. Rustic wooden houses, well-maintained gardens, a crystal-clear river flowing nearby. But soon I noticed no one talked about the past. When I asked where they had come from, the answers were always vague. "It doesn't matter." That doesn't exist anymore. When I mentioned going back to the city to grab some things, the smiles of the people would fade instantly, as if I had said something absurd. Elias just looked at me calmly. If you want to go, you can go. But why would you? Here, you are safe. That's when I started noticing the unsettling details. The fences were too high for a place that shouldn't be afraid of anything. The nights were too silent, except for a distant chant that sometimes echoed through the forest. Low, almost a lament. And then, there were the missing people. There were more houses than there were inhabitants. I asked about this and they told me some people had evolved. The way they said it, with a sick gleam in their eyes, made me want to run away. But I couldn't just leave. My car wouldn't start anymore. My pulse quickened. Someone had tampered with my car. I checked the engine, checked the gas, everything seemed intact, but it simply wouldn't start. I went back to the accommodation trying to appear calm, but my mind was in a panic. I needed to find a way out. But that night I realized I no longer had privacy. People passed by my window too often, as if they were watching me. At dinner, Elias sat next to me and looked me in the eye. "You seem worried." He smiled. "Don't worry. Tomorrow, you'll understand." I didn't want to know what that meant. I waited until everyone was asleep and left the accommodation in silence. The moon lit the dirt paths between the houses. I went to the workshop where they kept the tools, hoping to find something that would help me fix the car. But when I entered, my blood ran cold. On the floor there was a pile of folded clothes, modern clothes, jeans, t-shirts, sneakers, nothing like the rustic garments everyone wore. And the worst part? I recognized some of the pieces. They were from people I had seen there in the first few days, but who were no longer there. My breath caught in my throat. What had they done to those people? My eyes scanned the workshop, looking for any clue, any rational explanation. That's when I saw it in the corner, a half-open door. Inside, a trapdoor on the floor, with a staircase leading down into the darkness. Someone was hiding something there. A shiver ran down my spine. I should run. I should get out of there as fast as possible, but a noise behind me paralyzed me. The workshop door slammed shut with a dry snap. I turned instantly, and my blood froze. Elias was there, and he wasn't smiling anymore. "You came before your time," he said, his voice low, almost disappointed. My heart was pounding. I was just looking for tools. I tried to improvise, but I knew he wouldn't believe me. He sighed, almost like a father dealing with a disobedient child. "You still don't understand, but you will." Before I could react, he snapped his fingers. Other people appeared at the door, blocking the exit. Men and women who had once seemed so peaceful, now stood there, watching me with empty, hungry eyes. My body wanted to run, but my legs were frozen to the ground. Their gaze was vacant but intense, as if they already knew exactly what was going to happen. Elias took a step forward, extending his hand. "Don't resist. You've been chosen." My mind screamed. Chosen for what? I did the only thing I could, grabbed the nearest screwdriver and lunged at him. Elias didn't step back. He smiled, but before he could react, I drove the screwdriver into his shoulder and ran. I heard his scream echo through the workshop, but I didn't look back. My feet barely touched the ground as I ran toward the road, dodging houses and the eyes that started appearing in the windows. They were waking up. I managed to reach the car even though I knew it wouldn't start. It didn't matter. I just needed to hide until dawn until I found another way. But when I threw myself into the car and curled up in the seat, holding my breath, I saw something that made my stomach drop. In the window, in the reflection of the glass, dozens of faces were watching me in the darkness. My chest was rising and falling quickly, trying to hold back the panic. They were all there. They didn't speak. They didn't move abruptly. They just stared at me, their faces still, their eyes reflecting the little light from the moon. My heart hammered in my chest. That's when Elias appeared among them. Blood was dripping from his shoulder, but he was smiling. He approached slowly, tilting his head as if studying my reaction. "You can't fight this," he said, his voice soft. "Here, you are reborn." My hand gripped the door handle. If I tried to escape, they would catch me. But if I stayed, before any of them could move, I threw myself out of the car and ran. I ran like I'd never run before, with no direction, no plan. I just knew I had to get out. The tall grass tore at my skin, and branches hit my face, but I kept going. Behind me, I heard footsteps. They were coming. That's when I saw on the horizon the first rays of sunlight. My chest filled with hope. And then, everything went silent. I stopped running and looked back. They were no longer there. No shadow, no sound. Just the empty forest as if they had never existed. I managed to escape. But to this day, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night feeling like someone is watching me. And worse, I receive letters with no return address, all with the same message: you can still come back. Story 5. Moving to a new city alone was scary enough, but finding an affordable place to live was an even bigger challenge. After weeks of searching, I found the perfect listing: a small, furnished apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and the price was unbelievably low. It seemed too good to be true. The owner, a man named Mr. Augusto, responded quickly to my message and said I could visit the same day. He was kind, attentive, maybe even a little too friendly. He said he was in a hurry to rent it out and that if I decided on the spot, he would give me a discount for the first month. This should have been a red flag, but I only thought about the savings. I accepted immediately and moved in the next day. At first, everything seemed normal. The place was simple but cozy, and I finally felt like I was starting my new life. But on the first night, something bothered me. The windows were nailed shut from the inside, with nails. I thought it was strange, but ignored it. Maybe it was just a way to reinforce security. However, as the days went by, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. The door's lock was different from the inside, like it had been altered to prevent it from opening easily. And every night around 2 a.m., I'd hear the sound of something light scraping against the wood of the door, echoing through the room. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, that maybe it was just the wind or a neighbor passing by the hallway. But the bad feeling didn't go away. Then, on the fourth night, I decided to test it. I dragged a chair over to the door and sat there, waiting. Time passed slowly. Midnight. 1 a.m. Nothing. But when the clock hit 2 and 3, the sound returned. Scratches. slow, subtle, like someone was testing the wood, feeling its texture. My body went cold. I held my breath and looked through the gap under the door. On the other side, a pair of bare feet. My heart raced. Someone was standing there watching me in silence. The hallway had no lighting, but I could make out the outline of dark nails, pale skin. I didn't move, I didn't want to draw attention. But then the sound changed. The doorknob turned, first slowly, then with more force. Someone was trying to get in. I backed away, holding my phone with trembling hands, ready to call the police. But before I could type, the person outside whispered my name. My blood froze. I had never told anyone my name there. The owner of the apartment knew, of course, but no one else. So how did this person know? My throat went dry. My instinct screamed at me not to respond, not to make any noise. I backed away from the door as much as I could, my chest rising and falling rapidly. The whisper came again, this time lower, drawn out. "I know you're awake." My stomach churned. The doorknob turned again with a sharp click. I knew the lock might not hold for long. I thought quickly. I grabbed my bag with my documents, phone, anything I could grab, and ran to the window. I tried to open it, but the nails held it tight. I was locked in. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest. That's when I heard one last sound that almost made me vomit from sheer terror. The latch on the door clicked. Someone was unlocking it from the outside. They had a key. My muscles froze. Someone was coming in. I didn't think twice, grabbed the lamp next to me and ran to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My hands trembled so much I could barely hold the phone. I called the police, whispering my location as fast as I could. Outside, I heard the bedroom door open slowly, slow footsteps on the wooden floor. My whole body went cold. They were inside my apartment. The silence came shortly after, the kind of silence that drives your brain mad. Had they left? Were they waiting for me to come out? My mind tried to rationalize, but then something made my skin crawl. A heavy breath. Right on the other side of the door. I backed away as much as I could, covering my mouth to avoid making any sound. Then the footsteps started again. They moved away. I heard the creak of the front door, and then a click. They had left. I stayed there, locked in the bathroom, listening to the absolute silence of the apartment. Had they really gone? Or were they waiting for me to come out? My body trembled, my mind screamed at me not to open the door, but then... sirens. The police had arrived. I waited to hear voices in the hallway before finally gathering the courage to leave. When I unlocked the door and ran out, I saw 2 officers waiting for me. But something made me even more terrified. The apartment door was closed, locked, as if no one had left. I explained everything to the officers, but when they inspected the place, they found no one. No sign of a break-in, no clues. Only one thing was different. The bathroom mirror. On it, a strange mark, as if someone had traced their fingers over the fogged-up glass. 4 letters written with a faint, almost imperceptible stroke. Wait. I never went back to that apartment.